Welcome to another episode of the Kswap 240 presented by Turn 14 Distribution.
The list is done. There's nothing left to check off, but we still have lots of little jobs to take care of before this car is truly ready to run and drive.
In the last episode, we had the glorious first startup and it went well. We've got a motor that runs, there's no knocking. So this episode, we're gonna kind of look at the things that you don't normally get to see once a swap like this is completed. And that is all the teething little headaches that we need to fix. Like when we started the car up, there's definitely a rattling going on. So I don't know if it's one of the heat shields. There's an exhaust leak that I heard that we're gonna have to deal with. We also have to make sure to bring this car up to temperature so that the thermostatic oil pressure or oil sandwich adapter opens up and fills our oil cooler so we know there's no leaks there. We got to bleed the coolant system. We got to put the IAT into the intake rather than where it was before on the manifold. So as you can see, there is lots to do. So it's time to get to it.
Aggressive, I like it.
No, all right. So we had a bit of an exhaust leak and a rattle. So you can hear it rattling away down here.
Yeah.
So I pulled the lower heat shield off and the sound is still there. And after getting this up, it sounds like it's this bellows for some reason. It is noisy. It's not really touching anything. See, if I push down on it, it even makes more noise. So I'm gonna have to take this off and kind of have a look at, inspect what the issue is here. Well, it looks like the culprit has been confirmed. It is the bellows. You can kind of see it is hitting. And the reason why is we actually had to smush this area here to give it a little bit of clearance around the transmission mount here. And when we did that, I think what we did is we ovalized a bit too much of the bellows. So now the inner portion, I'm sure it's pretty hard to see in there, but there's an inner portion here that is hitting the backside of it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna actually try to cut some of this out and remove it, which should free up, give it a little bit more space to kind of get it back to where it's more round and true, and it shouldn't do that whole knocking noise. So here we go. We had to cut a little bit of that off. There it is.
So now.
See? So much better. So everything's back together and sounds like we're good. I'm gonna start it up in a second and see how that works out. But before I do that, just a quick note, make sure to buy OEM genuine O2 sensors. These are wide bands, and this is what Honda needs to use to make sure to get an accurate air fuel ratio reading. So these are can be purchased aftermarket, but I find they don't work as well as the OEM ones. They are expensive, but well worth it. I'm swapping out one that I had kicking around here that was just a mishmash of wires. I wasn't even sure what this was, but we just put it in for the time being. So we're putting this sensor in, and I also did add a bung for my AEM wideband that I will be using in the very near future. All right, sounds like there is no more rattling, which is good. The heat shields are back on. So I think the next step here, DP, is we let this car run, see if the thermostat opens. Hopefully that bleeds the coolant system. We look for water leaks and oil leaks and see if the oil cooler thermostat opens as well. So I've got the Honda K Manager open here, just seeing if everything's working, and so far it looks like we are pretty good. We've got air fuel going, we've got our intake air temperature set up, and there is our engine temperature, so it's 147 and rising. I did see an error code pop up here. Oh, it's our secondary O2 heater circuit, and the reason why that's coming up is because we don't have a secondary O2 sensor. So thankfully we can turn that off, which is nice. And yeah, everything else looks to be in decent shape. So I'm just gonna let this car run for a bit until we hear the fans come on. I should also note we do have a TPS issue, and I'm sure this is a tuning problem, but right now when we open the throttle maybe 15%, that's when it starts showing any type of percentage on the actual computer. So for the first little while where you crack the TPS, the computer doesn't know you're opening the throttle plate at all. So that's why there's a big stumble when you try to give it gas too quickly and whatnot. But I'm assuming that will be something we will fix when the tuning portion comes, just because that TPS is different on the throttle body of the S2000 than it is on the K series, and they're not interchangeable, unfortunately. So I'm kind of stuck with that for the time being, but I know somewhere in this there's a fix for it.
Sure, it's set to turn on at 180. There it goes.
So now the one thing we do need to check is our oil pressure. And I do have a cool way to do that.
What is this magic, this sorcery, PT?
This is pretty baller, isn't it?
It is.
This is actually a stack cluster that I've had for, man, 4 years now. And I've been meaning to put it in, and now is the right time to do it. So this is actually gonna be going into the car. It is a street cluster, so it reads mile per hour, kilometers. You can change that up. But most importantly, it has all of the parameters that I need, like water temperature, oil pressure, oil temperature. I can even wire in fuel temperature or fuel pressure. So what I did right now is just hook this up so we can actually watch our oil pressure and see where we're at. And I hooked up the water as well. So we'll see how this goes. But this is actually a low oil pressure warning light, which I think is set at 30 PSI, I'm not sure. But let's see how this thing works.
How did it fit into a stock housing, PT? This is magic.
Yes, that is something else I should mention. Toby Broadfield of Broadfield Customs built that amazing whole setup for me. I'll link him in the description. He does amazing work, so if you're interested in this kind of job, he can definitely do it for you. He does all of the custom gauges.
Ballin'. There you go, oil pressure, 22, 23.
Yeah, so that's pretty standard on a warm engine, I think.
At idle, yeah.
At around idle. 20 seems good.
At least it's not saying 0.
No, I know, that would have been the problem. So let's see if I can cycle through here. Oh, there's oil temperature. So we are at 140 Fahrenheit. We've got 14.5 volts, so our charging system works. Ooh, it's even got a lap timer on it. I don't think I'll be using that because the beacon system is so outdated.
Yeah, it's an old school.
It's like an old school system, so I'm not gonna be using that, but everything else here is pretty badass. So anyways, yeah, so it looks like our oil pressure is pretty good. Let me give it a rev and we'll see what it comes up to.
Yeah, good idea.
Oh yeah, look at that, comes up right away.
Yeah.
That looks like we got good oil pressure.
Yeah.
Yes. All right.
That's a good sign of a healthy motor.
That is a good sign. In terms of getting the speedometer working with this kind of swap, the factory one, it's a tough call because the transmission on the BMW doesn't have a speed sensor output. So what you would need to do is, I think if you have an ABS rear differential, you can take the wires off of that and buy like a Dakota digital converter, which in turn you could set up and wire and then adjust the speed accordingly. I know I did that with my S13 way back in the day when I did a V8 swap with the speed sensor on that. So there's certainly a way to do it. We won't be going there. What I'm going to be using with this is a GPS-based speed setup. And here we are. Our intake air temperature sensor is tapped into my wonderful titanium intake. So that was a pretty simple and easy job. Nam's just going to have to relocate the wiring. which again is good because he hasn't finalized it. And I think it's time for us to move on to bleeding the clutch and seeing if we have all the gears and whatnot. So I've gone through the painstaking procedure of bleeding the clutch system, and the slave is a real pain. You actually have to take it off the transmission, hand pump it out. There's a whole procedure system. So I think it's all bled, but the issue right now is that the clutch pedal feels really, really soft, and you start the car up and you try to put it into gear.
Yeah.
You want to see? So I have the clutch pushed down and I'm pushing the car into gear, and the wheel starts spinning. Yeah. And it's really tight, so I can force it in there. Now it's forced in there, but it just spins and spins and spins and spins. So this is somewhat of a known issue, and Miata actually, for their whole K-swap into the Miata, offers a adapter for a 3/4 inch master cylinder. And what I'm gonna do is install this into this car because the factory BMW one is also 3/4 inches. However, you need an adapter for this to bolt right into the 240SX chassis. And I have one coming from Siki, but that's not gonna be here till tomorrow. So let's cut to that. Here is our Siki adapter for our Wilwood master cylinder. So now this is a bolt-on affair. I should mention that I actually had to change the rod out on this end out of the Wilwood from the 241 because it's a little bit longer. So that makes this a full bolt-on affair. As you can see, I've got the line on. I've bled this entire system now. That clutch pedal feels much, much better. It's actually stiff. All right. Start this car up, and all right, there's first gear. I got the clutch in. Bam. Let's grab second. No more spinning. Yes. All right. That is sweet. Okay, so that is the proven solution for the clutch. You do need the 3/4 master. Earlier, I mentioned we had a TPS issue, and here it is. So when I crack the throttle body, you can see it is still reading 0, and I keep going and going and going, and there we have 1%. So there's about 15 to 20 degrees of this throttle moving before the TPS sensor picks up any reading. And I tried to reset it through here, which is you hit read on the Honda, it reads -5%, and then what you're supposed to do is go to full throttle and hit read again, and it reads 74%. However, that means it's out of range. So normally what you would do on the K-series motors is you would be able to adjust it. So their TPS sensors are adjustable from K-Tune. I think they make a great one for that. Unfortunately, that's not gonna work here. So what I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to drill out the bolts on here, and they're like a breakaway bolt, unfortunately. So if I take this off, you can see here's our problem. You can't just adjust this very easily because it's a non-adjustable TPS sensor. So it's problematic in that sense. As you can see, these are breakaway bolts. They snap off, and this isn't meant to be adjusted. So what I'm gonna do is drill these out and then notch this sensor so I can move it a bit. A little bit of grinding, and there is our factory TPS sensor. As a bonus, check this out. It's actually slotted. So it's going to have the ability to do exactly what I wanted it to do, and that's to be able to adjust it this way. So I'm gonna put some bolts in here, bolt this back on. We're gonna cross our fingers and see if this worked out. Throttle body is back on. I've made the adjustments to the TPS, and in the parameters of the Honda, we are at 0.7%. So that is different than the -5, and guess what? There is our TPS reading. And the moment that I crack it, it reads 1%, and full throttle 100. So I think I've solved the solution or the problem with our TPS. So as you saw, it's not that big a deal. You just gotta drill the bolts out, then you can make your adjustments in the Honda system and you're good to go. After some fiddling and a little bit of clearancing, would you check it out? My goodness, the stack cluster is in and it looks absolutely glorious. I'm in love with this setup. Toby did such an amazing job on the install. And check that out. I cannot wait to drive the car with this thing installed. It looks so badass. A fan of the channel, Chad from Wicked Whips, sent me these pretty cool fender washers that are made by Raceaesthetics, and I think they're a very cool addition to my engine bay that I've been trying to make a little bit more blingy. As you can see, it's starting to look pretty good, but these old bolts, well, they're not so great. So, thanks again, Chad. I'm really digging these. Thank you. So that is a wrap on this video. We are this close from ripping this car on a racetrack. The last thing left to do is go get it tuned, which we're gonna be working with On Point Dyno as we always do. Sasha's gonna work his magic, and hopefully this thing makes some great power. I'm super excited for that. Thank you as always for watching. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. Make sure to turn on your notifications and hit the subscribe button. And if you're looking for merchandise, make sure to check out speedacademy.shop.